The research indicates that high net worth women are nearly twice as likely as high net worth men to find giving to charity as the most satisfying aspect of having real wealth. Why is that? And is it safe to assume that it's because we are people pleasers until we die? Or is it just that we're better people? What do you think it is?
I think it's because women care, and women are prepared to share, but at the same time, women don't want the recognition. How many buildings, how many hospital wings are named after women? So they will do it
Hmm.
quietly, except for Mackenzie Scott and Melinda French Gates, who are the new role models and trailblazers. I mean, what they're doing is so exceptional.
Yeah. And you talk a lot about the connection between net worth and self-worth for women, and I want to dive into that at some point, but you work with high net worth women probably from their 40s to their 80s, right? Some of these women gained their wealth through inheritance, some of them through the passing of a spouse, many of them made it on their own, but there is a mentality around owning your wealth that women
Yeah.
as we age are having trouble with. Do you think there is a shift in the way women are giving themselves permission to acknowledge, feel pride in, and then use their wealth at hand?
Well, what it is a whole new power opportunity. Women have always wanted power, and they've always wanted to be recognized for the power that they do have. But now they have it with their wealth, but they're still kind of like, "Oh my goodness, am I prepared to jump and go for the acknowledgement that I've always been seeking, or am I stepping out too far too fast?" So there's a whole attitude of proceed with caution and be
Hmm.
very discerning and aware before you make that leap.
Well, and I love that the two of them are the new role models. It's a beautiful template they're creating, but I want to take a step back and I want to talk about you. I know you're a wealth advisor who shifted your focus to helping boomer women. How did you end up in wealth management and why focus on boomers?
I was one of the first female managers for Proctor Gamble in Canada, way back
Okay.
when, like 1972. So, of
Okay.
course, that was a really big deal. And then, of course, they kind of forget about you. And so I had tried to leave several times, was never successful because I always had a VP who didn't have one entrepreneurial bone in his body. And he would manage me back into the business, either with a promotion or more money or whatever. But I wasn't going on international assignments. And so, if you're a top notch executive, you need that international assignment. Well, of course, he wouldn't promote me because I was a mother with a small child. I mean, that was the 70s and the
Right.
80s. And it was just crazy. So I finally left and I ran politically. It was an incident that happened that caught my attention, and I had just gone on to a community services board, and a very, very, very awful thing happened. And they said, "Okay, Nancy, you go and talk to the cameras." And what I learned at Procter and Gamble was one of the really powerful messages is that when a tragedy like that happens, no one person is at fault. It's like a whole total quality system that has fallen apart. And that's exactly what happened. In a corporate setting, there's an organizational structure. In the community, everybody has a voice. That's the power structure. So working my way through that was really, really interesting because it really depends on how much sense you can make out of where people are coming from and what the situation is and how we all work collectively to make it better. So I was a community leader. I did. I ran and I lost, but I went on in community leadership for 3 years. I was recruited by this consulting firm. And through that process, I met this woman who'd been VP of a big, huge company, international company in Canada, had been given a bag load of money, went to a broker. It was a man, and she was really upset with how well she would. So she decided she would be a wealth advisor. So when she met me, she said, "Nancy, I think this is something that you should consider." So her boss and I got along really well. And he said, "Okay, well, you've got to have licenses." They say, "Okay, now you got to go find your own clients."
Right.
Okay.
Go hunt.
So, right, clients are ones people who you feel you can add value to their whole wealth scenario, which is basically their life scenario. So that's when I decided to focus on women, not exclusively, but primarily. And so as I
Okay.
started to work with women, I realized that they are like the nurse practitioner in their family. They can't get beyond a lot because they've got all these responsibilities of not only their career, but looking after their families from a health standpoint. And so, how
Hmm.
much knowledge do they have to really handle that role? So, that's when I started to partner with not for profit, health related organizations focusing on women. And we know that heart and stroke disease is the leading cause of death for women, not cancer, not it is heart disease, cardiovascular. So I would partner with the Heart and Stroke Foundation and I would invite my clients to come and bring their friends and hear their presentation, increase their awareness. But equally important, they now have contacts to go to if they have questions because Google doesn't answer all the questions we need to have answers to. And we certainly can't call our doctor up with a quick question. And so I did that with several different organizations. And so over all those years, I kept bringing women's health front and center. I also emphasize that as a wealth advisor, a total wealth plan that is top of game is one that anticipates health related scenarios. For
Mm.
example, what happens if you have a critical illness? What about a disability? What about premature death? So, a total wealth plan includes all of that.
What is the profile of the average woman you work? What does her life look like?
I don't have clients anymore. I sold my
Okay.
practice with my clients, but I do a lot of work with different events. And
Okay.
so, an ideal profile of anybody who would participate is probably a woman, I would say 35 to, I don't have anybody who comes who's 100 that I can think of, but certainly older women. And one of the groups that one of the cohorts that I'm most impressed with is the over 80 crowd because they keep on going and they keep
Mhm.
on going and making a significant contribution in their
Mhm.
communities. It's just so impressive. And it isn't just one or two. So I'm in the process of starting a whole awards ceremony that will recognize that. And it's called the Age of Integrity because
Okay.
50 is kind of a turning point. 50
Mm.
is when, kids are launched or almost launched. And even if they're still in your basement, they're still thinking about getting launched. So now
In
you're
your
starting to
basement.
free up time yourself. And it's a whole new world. You've got a potential 50 more years. Well, those
Yeah.
years can be so incredibly significant in so many ways.
Well, there is a shift of the spot that you occupy in the circle of life around 50, regardless of whether you even had children or got divorced or were widowed or whatever it is. And it does make you reconsider. And I feel like women, at least of my generation, are being very intentional about what do I want now?
Exactly.
Do you find any common thread in those who give versus those who give and are active?
Well, it's interesting you say active because normally the active ones are the givers. So the action comes before the gift. Again,
Okay.
generally speaking. So if you're involved in the community, then you have a good sense of what those organizations are and the impact that they make that may cause you to step up and make a significant donation. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Women's Philanthropy Institute. They're doing amazing work, amazing work. They do webinars frequently with top notch resources. And actually, millennials are more likely to give than boomers.
That's
Interesting.
surprising.
Right. Women, millennial women, because they're focused on women, millennial women.
Well, and I would be curious if my assumption is correct that they're giving to climate and political causes because these are the things that are sort of top of mind. One of my most popular podcasts was with a gentleman who studies this trend of people being child free by choice. They say up to 25% of people in the US over the age of 18, and they went all the way from 18 to 99 are child free by choice. And which is a valid choice, but nowadays people are more vocal about it. And I think one of the very small reasons for it is people are worried about the future of the world,
Exactly.
physically and politically, right? So I would assume that a lot of the giving is going in that direction, but it's very heartening to know that millennials are giving that much. So when you think about the arc of a woman becoming a donor or a major giver, and making sense of our own personal net worth. Tell me a little bit about the connection between net worth and self-worth for people who didn't grow up with the wealth they have now.
Well, I think that's one of the main reasons why you really, really, really need a trusted wealth advisor.
Mm.
Because that person, and when I was a wealth advisor, those were exactly the kinds of conversations that I would have with people. And it doesn't necessarily mean you didn't have wealth and now you do have wealth. What I'm working with is the fact that they now do have wealth. And you have to talk that all through in terms of what would you ideally like to do with that wealth. And if they haven't thought about philanthropy, then it's
Mhm.
my job to point out the opportunities that do exist with philanthropy. Is this something that you ever thought about? And then what, depending on the response, it's like, no. Or actually, my grandparents were terrific in the community. They were immigrants and this is what they did. So it's a big, huge conversation that you're having. And we all love those deductions from our income tax return. But then, more importantly, or equally important, if you're in a situation to give or to share, normally the beneficiary is not the person you've directed your funds to, it's you as the giver or the donor. You feel very happy, very proud of yourself that you have done what you've done.
What of causes do the boomer women who you work with care most to give to?
Health is a big issue because every
Mm.
neighborhood that we live in has a hospital. And hospitals more and more have little or no funding from sources that they would have had in the past.
Mm.
And also, women realize that a lot of women's research has been done in such a way that the research was considered to be, women were considered to be little men. And so boomer women are smart women. I mean, as were their predecessors, but they're now paying attention to that and they now have the power to steward some of their wealth in that direction.
I mean, I can remember 25 years ago, right out of college, and finding out then that the temperature at which they set all the offices in Midtown Manhattan was the optimal temperature for the male body. And that's why the women were always freezing, right? Something so
Exactly.
simple, right?
Exactly.
And Tylenol, all these medications were tested for the male body. I remember going to take that
Oh, yeah.
horrible prep drink for my colonoscopy because I'm 48 and I did it 2, 3 years ago. I went to take that prep drink and I said to my doctor, I said, don't you need my weight, before you put in the prescription for the prep drink? And she said, no. I said, but you're going to give the same prep drink to me and I'm 5'2", and you're going to give that same prep
Right.
drink to some man who's 6'5", and I'm supposed to drink this whole thing? And she said, yeah, you're supposed to drink it. I said, well, something doesn't add up, right?
Good for you. Good for you. No, no, and this is the whole issue. The other thing that I'm seeing women investing in is young girls. Where I live, we have an organization called Reaching for Rainbows.
Mm.
And we live not, I mentioned that we live between Toronto and Montreal on Lake Ontario in a community that's like the Hamptons. We have over 90 wineries, all sorts of great foodies, the works. So it's a
Okay.
pretty, pretty lovely community. But on the other hand, it's close to a lot of urban activity. And the last thing that we want is any kind of human trafficking to happen. And more often than not, it is young girls.
Of
This
course.
Reaching for Rainbows is for girls 6 to 9 years old. It's an after school program. The whole purpose of the exercise is to help them build their confidence through having their uniqueness coming forward. But it's so important that those young girls, 6 to 9, not 10 to 14, because that's when you're probably the most vulnerable, but
Yeah.
6 to 9, they have a sense of who they are and starting to realize that they are worthy. And if you feel that you're worthy, then that in itself gives you a level of confidence
Mm.
to, turn away from things that might have caught your attention previously.
It feels very personal, but also very universal. My great aunt was married off before she was 12 in a village in India, and that was normal at the time, and it was not a good
Amazing.
life.
Oh,
And meanwhile, I get to have my college and my graduate degree in my Midtown Manhattan apartment, and it's not that far removed from our lives. And to know that it's
right.
still going on, it's just interesting because I think that for women, I feel like we're dealing with all of the meatiness of midlife, but for everyone, it does feel like a turning point of thinking about what was I made for? not just what do I want, right? And I find so many women going back to the story of, it's always the matrilineal kind of line and thinking, what about her? But the thing is, she's still out there, right? So I think it's interesting you point to girls. When you said healthcare, I assumed it was women's healthcare because women are under attack. But I understand I occupy a very privileged spot. And I understand that I occupy that spot because those who came before me, who were not so
Right.
privileged, fought their way out and were lucky.
Exactly. Well, in Canada, we've got a big 100th anniversary coming up, October 18th, 2029. And this is the famous five who, way
Mm-hmm.
back when, got women in Canada declared as persons. And if you were declared to be a person, then you had the right to vote. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
working with lots of different leadership women we're all working towards this anniversary. But my key question is okay, that was then, this is
Mm-hmm.
now. What about women beyond the 100th? What do young women want going forward? The other thing that we know is happening, and in a very negative way, is young males feeling displaced
Yeah.
because of the rise of women's positive impact and that whole
Mm-hmm.
phenomenon. So, at the same time, we're focusing on everything that women have accomplished and with more to come. Listen, you cannot leave these young males behind. And a smart woman will pay attention to making sure that we're all going forward together.
Yeah. I interviewed on the podcast recently James Bloodworth. He is an author and investigative reporter. He wrote a book called Lost Boys where he went deep into the manosphere and
Okay,
he
that's
sort
super.
of accidentally, to begin with, but he ended up really kind of infiltrating that world and talking about, I guess his big takeaway was how easily boys can be radicalized into this, right? Right? We need a balanced approach, not
Of
just to
course.
helping the girls. But there is that statistic
Right.
that says if you give a woman dollars, she helps 3 generations of her family, right? You give that money to that man, half of it goes into some whiskey and maybe it goes into land, but it doesn't have the multi-generational impact. So we know
Yeah.
this, but you're right, we can't forget the boys.
No, not at all. It's so, so, so important because nobody wants to win at the expense of somebody else. We just want everybody to understand where that other person is coming from and what's important to them, and that we're all in this world together. So let's find a
Mhm.
way to make it work.
I think one of the beautiful things about midlife is I think you wake up to we were always a part of everything, and this life is a blink of an eye. And when I'm
Right.
gone, it's not really about my cousin and my son. It's kind of about all of the earth and all of these people and what can I do? And if one of the things you can do is give, why not?
Well, again, part of the whole women worth and wellness focus is for you to be your best so that you can
Mhm.
help others be their best, and that in itself is a gift. I was just thinking we all know what the message is when we fly, that we put the oxygen on ourselves first, but take it the next step. Now that you've
Yeah.
got the oxygen on yourself, what are you going to do? Like, what are you going to do?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's kind of a perfect metaphor for midlife because we've got the oxygen on.
Right.
What
Well, it
now?
was so funny when I turned 50, which I'm past for sure. When I turn 50, I'm saying, oh my goodness, I'm 50 years old. I can't believe I'm 50. Like just dancing around. And my daughter at the time is saying, are you okay, Mom? Are you okay? I said, but I said, 50 years is a long time. Like
Yeah.
it isn't just like a frisbee toss. I mean, a lot has happened in 50 years. And not every woman in this world lives to be 50. So that in itself is a privilege. Like you've been given a privilege. So what are you going to make of that privilege
Yeah.
to be better yourself, but also in giving back and doing good things in the world? Like why wouldn't you?
Me and my friends joke a lot about the Golden Girls, right, which we're all huge fans of, and how those women are the age we are now. It just makes me go back to I was talking to my son the other day,
Wow.
and he asked me something along the lines of, "Why do people say life is short?" And I said, "Well, people are living longer, so life is not that short." But I don't actually believe life is short. I believe life is incredibly long, but it just goes so fast. It goes so
Well, that's
fast.
very, very, very good point.
You
That's, you're
blink
spot on.
and you're
Spot on. I know.
and when you realize that you're
I
gonna blink and be 50, that means I'm gonna blink and be 90,
But that's
you know?
okay. It's been a wonderful journey, and you can look back with lots of really, really interesting memories. Lots of positive ones, ones that aren't so positive. But the
Yeah,
good news is you've prevailed and you've gotten beyond them all.
I'm still here. I'm still running
Exactly.
around wreaking havoc.
Right.
Tell me
I'm
about
not
some of
dead
the
yet.
seminars that you host, and is there anything surprising you find in these seminars?
That's a really, really good question. So, anyway, during COVID, I read a New York Times article about YOLO because people are realizing, their demise could be sooner than they thought, and it could come from something totally unexpected. So we did a YOLO event at a really nice restaurant, and I think about 45 women came, and we had four women business owners speaking. Actually, I don't think they were all, but they were all women leaders. And what I did, which was the key to success in my opinion, we had four. Each one was to come prepared to share their YOLO story in 10 minutes. Like, over to you. And I did not interview them. If you don't interview them, you find out all kinds of things about that person you never would have known because then
Uh-huh.
they tell you their story. Well, what ended up happening was there were women in the audience who said, Nancy, if you're doing this again, I would love to be. We ended up doing five, and we
I
did
love
them at a woman business owner's establishment. So that person was getting the profile. It was so much fun. And really, the learning was don't interview, let them tell their own story and celebrate who they are and what you've now learned that they've shared in possibly a really vulnerable way. So that
yeah.
in itself was just, that was fabulous. And it was all sorts of different ages and doing different roles and different stories, different past situations, but really, really positive. So, and I've got, my friend gave me this. I don't know where she got it once from. Can you see that?
Yes. Yeah, yeah. You only live
That's what it
once.
is. You only live once. So what's your story? In 10 minutes, tell me your YOLO.
Well, and I interviewed a woman who wrote a book called You Only Die Once, which
Yeah.
is fascinating, right? Because she calculates that if you're lucky, on average, you have 4,000 Mondays in this lifetime. So then you can do the math and see how many are behind you. And that makes you think, I'm probably going to call my cousin, take him to lunch. I'm probably going to
Right.
ask that person on a date. I'm probably going to sit on that bench and watch the leaves fall, whatever it is, because you only die once, which is a great title. It also,
Exactly.
what you're
And when
talking
you
about
do,
in their 10-minute stories makes me think about the Moth series, where people go up and it's like sort of an open mic and they get to reveal something. I have done quite
right.
a bit of public speaking, and what I find is every time you share something personal, the line of people that want to talk to you after your speech gets longer and longer, because whatever you've been through, someone else has been through something similar, and we need each other's stories. We really need
We
each
do.
other's stories.
We definitely do.
Yeah.
But going back to, when you realize that life is short, and you take those actions, you do call somebody that you haven't used to, whatever. That enhances your self-worth because you're really
Yeah.
proud of yourself that you did what, even if you call that person up and it ends up not being a good call. Well, guess what? You took the step to reach out, and so you are
Yeah.
proud of yourself. You're sorry for the other person that it wasn't as positive as it might have been.
Right. At least you tried.
Exactly. Exactly.
And it's interesting. My generation is so massively single in our 40s and 50s, and we're kind of on the fence about whether we want to couple up again. How important is that long-term partnership to the women who you have advised and the women who you work with now? Does it change over time?
I think I think those partnership scenarios really depend on circumstances because life happens, and if you have a partner and then all of a sudden something god awful happens, what is the communication through that challenging time? If you end up with a big surprise, how do you cope with that? And I said, What happens is when you get married or when you partner, before you get to the point that you have agreed to partner, you've had a ton of conversation. You wouldn't just go forward unless, like your grandmother, where it was just, okay, there you go,
Well,
that's
you
it,
had
this
no
is your
choice.
life. That
Yeah.
doesn't happen to us. We have all that communication opportunity, and then we agree, okay, you're somebody I want to spend more time with. And then as life unfolds, if you haven't kept that as a priority, that's when you're probably going to get a big surprise. Like your parents, I've been married for a very, very, very long time. And
Hmm.
circumstances are such that my husband had his whole career in the film industry, and basically I was in a corporate world. We had a family farm that we inherited that we went to every weekend. And
Oh,
had
wow.
we not gone to that family farm every weekend, I'm sure we wouldn't have lasted because
Wow.
our family time on the weekend would have been either with his friends or my friends. And of course, we have common friends from both of those groups. But to spend a lot of time with a whole film group all the time wouldn't have been my favorite act. And him with the corporate group, forget it. So my point is circumstances and communication will determine how you prevail, how you move forward.
Do you find that there's any difference between women who are partnered and not partnered later in life in terms of their giving?
It just depends. It really depends. I mean, again, go back to Melinda and
Yeah.
Mackenzie.
Yeah.
Those women, they didn't decide to break up their marriages.
Yeah.
It was thrust upon them, and they rose to the occasion doing what they're doing. So it really depends on the individual. I mean, they chose what they chose. They didn't have to. They could have chosen something completely different. But it's like those plastic dolls when they get
Mm.
knocked over. Does it come back up again? Or does it just kind of deflate? And so that's why you've got to have a strong core to begin with. And again, that's why I go back to your health, because if you've got that resilience, it's probably come because you're not focusing on your health. You feel like you've got it together, and now
Mm.
you've been given a huge challenge, which is going to take everything you've got to give to work it through, along with a whole lot of conversations with yourself in terms of, okay, what's my purpose now? What do I really want? How do I feel? What am I going to do? It's like, so what? Now what? But that's why you've got to be, really, really healthy to withhold or withstand all those torrential rains and winds.
Are the women who come to your group and to your seminars seeking purpose? Still seeking purpose?
Speaking purpose, yes. I thought you said yes. And if they're not, then I ask them. And they
Mm.
say, well, that's an interesting question. But it's true. It's true. Like some people are more likely to want to do some soul searching than others.
What do you think you'd be doing if you hadn't gone this route?
Well, if I had been successful at Procter and Gamble as a vice president or whatever, I would have bagloads of money. I would have a lot of money. So I'd have a whole pile of money, and I probably would be a leading philanthropist in terms
Yeah.
of what causes I don't know. Probably some of the ones that I mentioned, definitely healthcare, definitely healthcare. Um,
Yeah.
but I was on the Forbes Women's Summit, which was a week ago or whenever. And Demi Moore was one of the guests who was interviewed. And she said something that was really profound. And we all know Demi Moore and what she's come through in her life. And she said that life happens for you, not to you.
Yeah.
Like, in other words, life is given to you. So
Yeah.
what are you going to do with it? Rather than, oh my goodness, why is this happening to me? Blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
whatever. What am I going to do now? I
Yeah.
thought that was really, really interesting.
I will say that never in my life have I thought, why me? I mean, I don't think anybody
Right.
gets to almost 50 without it. But I have never thought, why me? Because I see everyone going through everything. And it's been,
Yes.
well, why not me? I mean, I also have all sorts of good things. And I don't say, why me? You can't pick and choose. This is just your life. And so,
Exactly.
like you said, so what, now what?
Yes. Yeah. It's like, so what? It's like, so what?
I will say this. You said what you would be doing if you had stayed at Procter and Gamble is you'd have a boatload of money and you'd be doing a lot of philanthropy. I would bet odds that if we could quantify the amount of philanthropy you would do in that situation, and we could extrapolate how much you would have made, how much you would have saved, and what kind of philanthropy you'd be doing. You've probably exceeded it by an order of magnitude with the work that you do now and the impact that you're having worked with so many women and handheld them down the path that they would have loved to have walked towards giving, but they wouldn't have done had it not been for what you've created. So thank you for doing the work that you do.
You're welcome, and my pleasure. I'm loving every day doing what I'm doing. I really am. And to your point, life is a privilege, so make the most of it.